All right, nice to see everybody here. Some of you I recognize from some of my other talks. I'm here semi-regularly. So my name is Sarah Hotchkiss. I own Catalyst Wellness Coaching, downtown Janesville. I'm in the Studio 107 hair salon right downtown, down from 808 Cheesecake. Everyone knows that. I'm across the building, the old bank that they're renovating to become the Children's Museum in 2024. So parking's still ample there until probably that goes up. But I primarily work with adults with autoimmune disorders and GI disorders. There's also people come to me because they want to get off their statin or their blood pressure medication, drop some weight, they're tired, things like that too. But primarily specialize in people with chronic disease that maybe have been in and out of the medical system that haven't really figured out they're not feeling better, or they're sitting with a whole bunch of medications. Sometimes those are causing side effects and they don't know what else to do. But really no one has sat down and have a conversation with them about maybe the food they're putting in their body, their sleep, their cortisol, rhythms, hormone stuff. By the way, in September, I will be back talking about hormones. Just kind of what to do when your hormones are off, which of course could be like an 8-hour presentation, but specifically I'm focused on postmenopausal, and I'll talk a little bit about men too with like testosterone levels. That's you, you'll come back. Yeah. Specifically around sleep and low estrogen, things like that. So that'll be September. November, I will be here again talking about what we call HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal fatigue. And so if you are tired all the time, or if you feel like you are tired and wired, your cortisol might be off. And I'll talk about how to test for that, what labs to run for that, and just kind of what to do for that. Some of these things are fairly easy fixes. Some, take a period of time. So I am also part-time at the doctor's office down in Janesville, which most people haven't heard of. Have anybody heard of that? So it's a private pay, cash pay, the doctor's office.
It's called
It's called the doctor's office.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So it's a cash pay primary care clinic. So we have nurse practitioners, doctors, chiropractors, massage therapists. I'm there. I do both mental health and nutrition. I'm a licensed therapist as well. We are right down from the job center, like a block down from the job center on the same side of the street. It used to be the old WIC. There was an old WIC building down there. It was blue and pink when we started renting it, so it was like also partially a child care center. You could tell like how it looked. And so we have 5 clinics in Wisconsin: Brookfield, Cedarburg, Burlington, Darien, and Janesville. So if you are waiting 6, 8 plus weeks, months to get into a primary care provider, if you don't have one because yours left, I'm hearing that a lot lately. Especially over at Mercy South. So if you're transitioning providers or they're setting up with a new provider, anything that you would go to urgent care for or your regular doc, there you can go to the doctor's office for. And it's cash pay. You can spend 45 minutes with the nurse though for about $110 or $120, which is super reasonable. Many people's copays, mine's $60 just to go, and I get 12 minutes with a nurse or a doc. So we can script things for you. You pay cash for the visit, or you can do credit, debit. We take HSA, flex spend. I do too in my practice. I take HSA and flex spend. And then we can run if we script anything for you, we can run that through your insurance. So that's kind of even better. What I found out in going there too, I've been to my GP for probably 10 years, but was that it was cheaper for me to actually pay cash for the meds than it was to run it through my insurance. So you can look at that as an option too. So I'm kind of in both of those places, but kind of downtown on the south side, kind of doing the same type of thing. At the doctor's office, I do some primary mental health therapy with couples and adults as well, and kids down to about the age of 14. So I have a small mental health practice over there as well. But for me, when people come in with chronic disease, autoimmune in particular, we're talking about rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia in particular today, but you'll hear me talk broadly about autoimmune disease. The mental health piece of dealing with a chronic disease and the nutrition piece really go hand in hand. like the stress of those things. And so for me, being dual licensed, like picking those apart is actually really difficult for me because I think they really intersect and they can be related. So anyone here struggle with RA or fibro that wants to share? Okay.
RA, fibro.
Quite a few of you. Okay, oh good. You guys go well together. So let's talk just a little bit about autoimmunity in general. And so I'm talking, there's a long list, there's like 80 autoimmune diseases, but I'm talking things like Hashimoto's, celiac, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, RA, fibro, all those things kind of fit into the same category. If you come to me and you say you have one or more of those things, which by the way, if you have one, you're more likely to get another. That's not cool. So I'm going to approach it the same way. It's all inflammation. It's just a matter of kind of where the inflammation is and kind of what part of your body it's attacking. So truths about autoimmunity in general. And so some of this stuff might be things you haven't heard before or a little bit different. The symptoms of your autoimmune disease can be reversed completely in some cases, okay? Just because you have an autoimmune disease doesn't mean you'll have poor quality of life for the rest of your life. You can eliminate most or all of your symptoms sometimes without any medications at all. Sometimes the side effects of meds, immunosuppressants in particular, can put you worse off than the symptoms that you had of your autoimmune disease. Improving your gut health and your digestion is the number one thing that you should do if you have an autoimmune disease, because your gut health and your autoimmunity and your inflammation are highly connected. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later again. My husband, he just said to me the other day, I didn't realize you were going to spend so much time looking at poop when you start doing nutrition. And so I run what's called a GI map pretty often down at the clinic. So if you have autoimmune disease, or if you have any kind of IBS or gut disease, I almost always run a GI map first. And so if you were here, it's probably recorded in the Basics website, it's on my website too, but if you were here maybe, I want to say it was like 4 to 6 months ago, I did a whole gut thing on small intestinal bacterial growth, which is something that I have, and just kind of all those pieces, and I passed around test kits and we talked about that. But so a GI map is something, a lab that I would have anybody run if you have an autoimmune disease or if you have any kind of gut disease.
What did you say you have?
I have small intestinal bacterial growth.
Is
And that can be,
Is that
nope,
what it's-
nope. But that can be connected with potential autoimmunity too. So if you have any kind of gut dysbiosis, that sets you up for potential autoimmune. So you'll want to kind of take care of that early. And so fixing your gut, whatever's off with that, and almost always when I see people with autoimmune, they're like, yeah, I'm bloated a lot, or like my digestion doesn't feel right, or whatever, those things are connected. So when I do a GI map, I can look if you have hidden parasites, viruses, Epstein-Barr in particular, that's connected with autoimmunity, worms, in fact. Usually you know if you have those, but I can look at your intestinal permeability, if you have leaky gut. We can look at just your overall intestinal health, your inflammatory markers. It's an 11-page report. It's awesome, and it shows us just lots of things. H. pylori, have you guys heard of something like that? That's like a typical gut infection. You see that all the time. And so usually I can tell if somebody has kind of symptoms of that. There's 2 guys I'm working with now, actually, middle age, been struggling with gut stuff, even have lost work time for like 20, 25 years, and they never had a stool test run, and so we ran a stool test, and they both had H. pylori, which was causing kind of all this stuff. So they're going through treatment, but that can be a huge root cause of some of that stuff. So if you had strep as a kid, an adult, and you were given antibiotics and it was treated, right? You feel fine, very common. That virus could still be harboring in your body. And over time, 10, 15, 20 years, that can potentially cause issues too. So those harboring viruses that you don't know you have can be connected with autoimmunity. Strep's, staph strep, overabundance of E. coli, kind of stuff like that. So treating your gut, if you have any kind of autoimmune, is one of the first steps of things that you can do. Going gluten-free is probably the number one thing, lifestyle thing that I would tell people to do. If you have autoimmune, we're going to talk about a handful of things, but that's the one thing that I would start with. I think easier said than done, but in some of the examples that I gave you, we talk about just kind of following a whole foods diet. It's just kind of really not even in there. Those options aren't even in there, so you don't have to worry about that. You are more than your genetics. So I hear a lot from people when they come in, well, this runs in my family. So I have high cholesterol, heart disease, blood pressure, so that's why I have this. Typically, that's only about 20% of the reason. We talk about genetics, something called genetic expression. That is the ability to turn your genes on and off from what you have. So we've all been dealt this deck of cards of these genes that we have. But your environment, your lifestyle, your food, what you put in your body, how well you sleep, that affects the ability to turn those genes on or off. And so those autoimmune genes, you want those off. Just because your mom or your dad or your aunt has an autoimmune disease does not mean that you will get one. It means you have a predisposition for it with heart disease, blood pressure, whatever. A lot of those can be reversed early on with lifestyle. I love working with young people, actually. I have quite a few people in their 20s I'm working with now, which is not my typical client, I wouldn't say. But it's awesome because then they're not coming in with quite as much baggage or a handful of meds, and I can kind of work with them on what to do so they don't, develop some of those things. So remember, you are more than your genetics. It's usually like an 80-20 type of thing. So 20% is your genetics and 80% is kind of what you do with them. And it's never too late to reverse some of that stuff and change some of that stuff. So if you're sitting here in the room over the age of 60, there's no room that no reason you can't change some of that stuff. So you can make some of those lifestyle and nutrition changes, which is usually always my focus here, to support your immune system and make sure that it's not fighting itself. I was talking about the gut piece too. 80%, you guys have probably heard this before, 80% of your immune system is located in your gut. So that's why it's important to treat the gut first, no matter what your autoimmune is. People come in and say, I have joint pain, or I have fatigue, or like you have all these other symptoms, but I'm not there to treat your individual sort of those pieces, or maybe what your rheumatologist would do. They treat those like individual things. Well, you have celiac, so we're going to do this, or you have RA, we're going to do this, you have fibro, we're going to do this, but it's all the same. It's for if your inflammation is reduced, and for your inflammation is low, then it won't matter, because that'll all be kind of calmed down. Okay, so let me run through a couple labs. If you're sitting here and you don't have RA or fibro, but you want to run some labs and see if there's some red flags, if you have one of those two things, we haven't run labs in a while, or you don't know what labs to run, or you don't know what I'm talking about, let me just give you a short list of things that you can check that will show how inflammatory your condition is, or kind of where you're at with things. The first test is called, and maybe just write you don't have to spell them out because it might be a lot, but it's called ANA. So that's an anti-nuclear antibody test. So you're going to want to run that one. If you have RA, fibro not as much, although if you go in with RA and fibro symptoms are very similar, and so that's why I kind of mushed them together today. So sometimes they're trying to pick apart sort of by process of elimination what you don't have before they sort of label you or kind of pick a diagnosis. But RF is called rheumatoid factor, and so that's a big one for rheumatoid arthritis, but not for fibro, so that's another one that you'll want to run. RF, yep. There's another one called anti-CCP, which is a test of some peptide and protein antibodies to see if they're present in your blood.
What did you say, PC?
Anti-CCP.
CCP?
CCP, yep. It's like anti-citronellid protein peptide proteins. You guys don't need to know all that. But it's basically proteins. We want to know if those proteins are present in your blood. ESR is another one. We just ran this on my husband last year. Erythrocyte sedimentation rate. ESR. Your doctor will know what these are too if you just say, can you run an ESR? If you type it in your MyChart though, they'll be like, I don't know about that. And then a real typical one that I have everybody run even before they see me, no matter if you think you have autoimmune or not, is CRP. So that's high reactivity, C-reactive protein. Again, another protein present in your blood if you're having an inflammatory reaction. So most of you maybe had that, or you know what I'm talking about there. We want that number to be like fairly low. Heads up, I just had a couple of people do this, and I had a woman that had like the flu, and then another woman that had just recovered from knee surgery, and they both ran their C-reactive protein and it was super high. I had to have them rerun it, because if you are currently fighting like even a UTI, some sort of infection or whatever, your CRP is going to be high because it's a response to the inflammation in your body. So make sure when you run your CRP, if you're looking for something like autoimmunity, that you're sort of at baseline status quo. You're not fighting something. You're not going in there sick. Because if you go in there sick, if I go in there sick, mine will be high too, but it's not necessarily indicative of other disease. Those of you have RA, those of you that have RA, typical signs: joint pain, swelling, stiffness, tenderness, even swelling enough that your hands and fingers can be deformed, and sometimes your feet. But a lot of times hands and feet is a big one that I hear people. Sometimes neck, shoulders, elbows. Fatigue, always fatigue. I work with people with lots of different things, and the number one symptom is fatigue. I don't care if you want to lose weight or if you have something else going on. Everybody's tired. And so I did a seminar, I think it was last year, where we talked about fatigue, and I talked about lab work to run if you're fatigued, but all this stuff kind of goes together. Sometimes there's weight gain from inflammation. Sometimes there's unintended weight loss. People can't keep on weight with RA and fibro. Stiff bumps under your skin, a lot of times on your arms and feet. Frequent UTIs. Again, back to the gut infection a little bit. Random fevers, we see that a lot too. Did you have a question?
No, I just was telling him that my neighbor was just saying she gets a lot of UTIs yesterday.
That can be from, depending how old you are too, that can be from other simple causes too, but like low estrogen is connected with UTIs a lot too, and cystitis. Yeah, and that's like, so again, if you're perimenopausal, postmenopausal, UTIs are usually, but there's ways to fix that too. I'm gonna talk actually about a whole kind of little segment on UTIs in September actually, just the whole hormone thing, So some underlying cause of autoimmune disease in general, but more particularly rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia, leaky gut, number one, talked about that kind of a little bit already. Another one that you probably are not talking to your doctor about or you don't think about is mercury poisoning, heavy metal tox. So depending on where you grew up as a kid or what you were exposed to, dental fillings from eons ago, heavy metal can alter or damage the cells of some of the tissues in your body long term. And it's not something where you like get a filling and the next day you don't feel good. It's that buildup of those toxins kind of in your body over a long course of time, could be 10, 20, 30 years, So you'll hear a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is like maybe something that happened like decades ago, you got strep or you got a filling or whatever, and it's like that stuff. That's the stuff that sets you up then for turning those genes back on that you don't want to do. Mold. So you can do mold testing. Black mold in particular for RA and fibro is huge. So there's kits you can get, or again, if I work with you, I can help you with that, but you can test some of that. If you grew up in an old house, if there was like flooding that wasn't fixed. I'm in a newer house and our basement we had like our hot water thing explode a whole bunch of times and like water seep in, but it wasn't flooded. My old house flooded too, but that was my number one concern, was we need to dry this out quickly. I don't care about the damage as much, but like I just wanted to make sure we didn't have mold sitting in my house for the next 20 or 30 years. We were ready to like rip down drywall, and so we had guys come out and test the wall and the carpet to see what was in it, and so we were good to go. It's usually that water that's like sitting for long periods of time if you don't keep it dry. We talked about leaky gut, but specific gut infections are connected with autoimmunity, and so one of the biggest ones is called Epstein-Barr virus. Is anybody, EBV, have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
So that can be a trigger if you have contracted that virus and but you didn't know and it wasn't treated. That can turn on one of those autoimmune genes.
What is that again? I forgot.
Epstein-Barr.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but what is it again?
Oh, it has a whole bunch of different symptoms, but a lot of like fatigue, muscle pains, usually gut stuff.
Isn't that kind of related to mono?
Oh.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. That turns like, yeah. People who get mono often have Epstein-Barr.
Okay.
So like, in fact, I run a GI map on myself every year actually, but I looked at that with mine, and when my husband was having back issues last year, we did Epstein-Barr on him too, because that was connected with MS, and we were concerned about that because he wasn't healing from all these surgeries. So I just walked in here with all these labs, and that was one of them. So yes, so college kids, we want to set their immune system up good, because that you hear of like kids getting mono all the time, which in itself is like rough, right? But it's later than 10, 20, 30 years later. So Epstein-Barr is what triggers mono a lot of times. And again, you get over the mono and everything's fine, but maybe not really, you know, depending on kind of how that was treated. So you can run labs and see if you are harboring Epstein-Barr, maybe from a mono infection, or you know, maybe from something else. So.
Can I get quick question? Gentleman, we were in a restaurant yesterday, and he said that his grandson had croup, which my son did, and they said later on that led like to asthma. Have you heard of it?
Oh, sure.
Really?
Mhm. Yeah.
So is that for sure, or like?
None of this
because-
stuff is black and white, but it's
Yeah.
like, again, I'm gonna call it predisposition, like
Yeah.
would set you up for
'Cause
potential.
He's always coughing, and I'm like,
Mhm.
you need to get tested for asthma. You know, and he just, you know, he's 30 and knows it all, you know, so he doesn't do it.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and like, I mean, asthma can be scary, my son has that.
yeah,
And so usually there's a triad of asthma too, with asthma, asthma and allergies a lot of times go together.
right.
And then usually, in particular, usually like food allergies, but then environmental allergies too, so those things kind of go together. But yeah.
Huh.
So again, it's all the idea of like your genetics and taking what you were dealt and dealing with those at any point in your life just differently. And it's all about reducing inflammation, you know, no matter what you have. So maintaining optimal weight is huge for RA2, because literally that's just more pressure on those joints and those muscles that you don't want. And so getting to a healthy weight, whatever that is for you, is important also. Moving your body is really important to do every day. It's super hard if you are currently inflamed with fibro or RA. And so this might sound off a little bit, but when I work with people, I address food and supplements, and that is all we do for 3 months. And we nail that, and they get used to doing meal prep and eating certain things, and we reduce their inflammation to when their symptoms are 70% better. Then I say, take a walk, try yoga, try exercise. Because if you are, I'm not sitting here saying don't exercise, but if you are exercise in an actively inflamed body, you're probably not gonna feel great, you're not gonna wanna do it again, and you might be making things worse. So you need to relax your immune system and kind of treat those things first before. I mean, I had a woman I was working with, I worked with her for almost a year, and at the beginning, gardening, she couldn't even like go to work the next day. And she had like a reception, like an administrative job, just from gardening, like planting tomatoes and like nothing crazy. I don't even mean like digging with a backhoe or anything, but like that was too much. Now she's a yoga instructor, which is awesome. So now she's teaching yoga. She's not out running marathons, but you don't need to do that. But you know, she's regularly exercising. but it stresses people out, because I think sometimes when people come to me, they're like, oh, she's made me do all this stuff. I'm gonna tell you to exercise and eat carrots and like all this stuff. But we really just focus on food, and I put together a custom menu for you that you like, and we'll literally like walk through it with you. I brought 2 cookbooks with me today, actually. We focus on that, and just, you don't need 20 supplements and meds in your drawer either, but I'd rather identify just like 5 for you. Curcumin, or like turmeric, a lot of you guys might take already, but a really good high dose form of that is awesome for RA and fibro. So, same with medications. I'm not your doctor, but when people come in and they're on a lot of meds, I work with them on the food and the nutrition, the supplements, and we reduce your inflammation first. Then we talk about, oh, maybe let's try working off some of these immune suppressants or some of these, meds. Same one I was talking about with gardening. I just talked to her yesterday, actually. She was on heavy duty immune suppressants and painkillers every day. And so she hasn't taken those in 6 months, I think she said yesterday. And so once in a while she takes like a Tylenol, and that's it. And so for her, it doesn't, I wouldn't say she has 0 pain, but her she's 80% reduction in pain, and she's not even on the painkillers, so that's amazing, right? But it really takes, she was calling me yesterday, she was like, oh, Sarah, I'm going to this. It was like his kid's birthday party, and they had like hot dogs and ice cream and all this stuff. And she's like, oh, this is my old life, or whatever. And we talked about like planning and preparing ahead of time. Not because it's bad to have hot dog or ice cream once in a while, but that she knew that if she had that, and this has happened to her a couple times before, that she'd be like swollen up and everything, like crazy for 3 or 4 days after. And it's funny because I do that with people, and people notice I do gentle elimination diets with people, and then they feel good, and then they eat something like that, and they realize, oh my gosh, I feel so horrible. And I'm like, this is how you used to feel, but you don't think about it because you just feel like that every day. So it's getting back to feeling different. And then your motivation for wanting to eat differently and say no to some of that stuff is the fact that you feel great, and you don't want to go back to feeling, the way that you used to. So. But yeah, exercise is good, but not necessarily right away. Hot and cold therapy. So doing things that intentionally stress your body out. Go fill your freezer with some, you guys seen people doing this, probably this is like all the rage right now, like sitting in ice water basically, like sitting in ice baths. And then alternating that with the infrared sauna that you probably do not have in your house, but like it's alternating kind of hot and cold things. But it's purposeful stress to your body, intentional stress to be able to rebuild some of those, rebuild your own immunity. So
The athletes do that.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I come from a sort of a primal background in my health coaching career, and tons of like endurance athletes in that group, and they're all doing that. I got pictures of people. Seriously, people just buy chest freezers and plug it in and then fill it up with water. I have done it twice at like a spa place where they had it, and I didn't like it. I like the cold part. The hot part was fine. When you go in the hot, the cold feels really cold because your body's hot, and then vice versa.
Probably like going from.
You're not supposed to scream at a spa, but I did, because I was like, this is insane. Who does this? But it's good, Some people will just get in like a little bit, maybe they don't like to submerge their whole body, but you get videos of people too, especially I see videos of like middle-aged guys who are like, I'm gonna do this is gonna be great. And then, their wife's like holding the video camera, and they're in and they're like, oh, I can't talk, because it's cold, it's ice, it's ice water. So, infrared sauna, if any of you guys do that, we have multiple sauna places in town here, by the way. Sauna, and we have the Salt Cave out off of Milton Avenue. I can't stand being in a sauna. I can't stand the heat, makes me dizzy. It really your infrared sauna only has to be 115 degrees actually to get some effect. And so I know they want the athletic club, that one's a dry sauna, and some of the other ones 160, 170. That's hot, and that's fine if you like that. But know that it only clinically, scientifically, only has to be at like 115 degrees. So if you go to one of those places, you can ask them, if you're not sure about the amount of the heat, you can ask them to adjust it to 115 or 120 and see how you feel. That's like warm hot.
How often would a person have to do that therapy? I mean,
I mean, you can start off doing a minute and a minute. People work up to like 20 minutes, I would say, total.
But I mean,
going back and forth.
how many, like, once a month or?
A lot of people do it daily,
Oh,
but
wow.
even once a week would be fine. Yeah.
I see.
That's why people are doing these setups at their house, because where are you gonna go and do that, and who's like realistically gonna drive and do that? My cousin in her house was gonna set up an infrared, like in one of their closets, they were gonna train it. Again, you only have to get up to like 115, 120, so it's actually not too bad, depending on how your house is insulated in the winter. We have friends that built about the same time as us, and they set up a cold piece in their garage, and then it's just kind of a step down, and then they bought like an infrared sauna. Have you guys seen these infrared sauna things where you're not in a room, but it like, it zips you up in like a package? So those are much more affordable, like a couple $100, like, so that's an idea too. Maybe you stand in a cold shower for a while and then you go jump in there. I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be fancy, but, and it's intense, but again, it's for a reason, so. Have you ever gone and gotten like a facial where they do something called the derma roller? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So I've done that quite a bit, and then my skin's all red and prickly and it looks weird like the next day or two. But it is to stimulate collagen, to naturally build collagen in my face. You can do that. That's the same idea as this hot and cold thing. You're stressing your body out purposefully, on purpose, just enough, not too much, but to rebuild basically those cells in your body to fight off if you have disease or things like that. It's the same with the collagen. We're rebuilding collagen.
Kind of
So
similar to cupping, probably.
laser cupping,
yes.
yep. Massage therapy even too. Yeah, laser. I've had laser on my face or like covered different parts of my body. Same thing, like collagen. So there's some like, I'm gonna call them like lower intensity things you can do that, you know, yeah, cupping. So massage therapy, I'm gonna throw in here craniosacral therapy too, because we happen to have a really good one in town here, Tammy Goldstein. So it's like wants to get in with her, but that's a good one too, along with massage.
What does she do?
She does craniosacral therapy, so it's similar to like myofascial release. Have you heard that? So I see her every 8 weeks for my jaw, but it's very light, lay on a table, you're fully clothed. So you're talking about
Like
some release
a little
there.
bit like chiropractic.
I mean, it's body work. Chiropractic's another one. No, it's much gentler than that. You're not doing big adjustments. I mean, she can, but so it's fascia. She's working with the fascia. So where your skin and your muscle meet. So like she can detect if I have fluid, like right now my ear's like really, you know, so my jaw's bothering me, but she can detect if I have fluid built up in there or whatever it is. I can lay on the table and she can detect if I have fluid like in my back or small intestine or whatever. It's very relaxing. It's not, some people are afraid to go to the chiropractor with some of that. It's not like that at all. It's not even like massage. She's barely touching you. So, but body work is really underrated for some of that stuff, and so those are always good investments. Supplements, we could talk for an hour, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details of all the supplements. I talked about curcumin. My top 4 for fibro and RA would be curcumin. And you guys get a good quality one. Either contact me and I will get you one. I have access to discount pharmaceutical grade supplements I can send you. Or talk to Aaron in particular at Basics here, and he'll give you good. We only, you know, carry good high quality stuff here. Your supplement that you go get at Walmart is not the same as one that maybe I could get you here or send you, because we want to look at the international units and where it came from, and it's not, they're not the same. You might be like, well, this one's cheaper, I'm just going to take this one. Same with the multivitamin, it's not the same. So some of that stuff just is not absorbing, and then you're just going to pee it right out of your body, and then you're just wasting $17, whatever. Curcumin. Vitamin D, you guys hear me talk about vitamin D every time I'm here, because it's good for everything. We want your vitamin D if you have autoimmune, but even if you don't, 60 or more. So if you go to the doctor, they're going to give you a vitamin D range. Now, how many of you get your vitamin D done regularly or once a year? A couple of you. Okay. That is not a regular lab. If you go in and you say, I need blood work, Sarah wants me to have blood work, they won't run that unless you ask. Why? Does anybody know why? It's all insurance. Yeah. So if you were to go pay for that at Mercy or Dean, it's like $600.
So how
But
many,
yet I can run it at the doctor's office for $60. So it's always covered though. I've never had anybody not have it covered. So you just have to ask for it.
how many milligrams or whatever do you suggest women take of vitamin D?
Depends.
Oh,
So you want your vitamin D 60 to 90 something, somewhere in there. If you're gonna, let's talk about testing first and I'll tell you how much to take.
okay.
Ideally, test your vitamin D, especially if you are not flying south for the winter, in like the dead of winter, like January.
Yeah.
So I test mine the first of every year. A lot of times I'll go to Mexico sometime later in January. I don't want to test it around then because it's going to be really high because I was on the sun. Test it because that's your low, okay? So when I tested mine in January this last year, it was 55, which is like borderline okay, but I was like, man, that's fine. Because if mine's 55 in the winter, that means it's probably 75 in the summer, and then that's great, and I'm out in the sun all the time. So 60 plus. The range in the doctor's office, they'll say 30 to 100, right? And so if you'd worked with me before, we talk about functional medicine, I'm gonna read your labs a little bit differently than they are at the doctor's office. They're gonna be like, you're in range, you're fine. And I'm gonna say, no. No, you don't need a prescription vitamin D. You do if you're under 35 though. But you're not functioning optimally. So I have women come to me a lot whose vitamin D is in the 30s or 40s and they're tired, that's why. So getting that up to 60 or plus or more. If you are under 30 or 35, you're gonna wanna get a prescription. It's super cheap, vitamin D from your provider, or 10,000 international units a day. So that answers your question about how much. 10,000. All it is 2 little pills. They're tiny. They're like twice the size of a birth control pill. They're little. They're gel caps. You're gonna want D3, always with K2, unless you have a blood clotting disorder. So K2, that helps the absorption. Vitamin D is fat soluble, so the K2 helps it. That's back to like what vitamins you buy and you know what matters. So capsule, like a gel cap or liquid is probably the best. I used to do liquid, and that's still probably my top choice, but it's a pain in the butt to travel with. You know, like you can't go on a plane with it, you can't, like the dropper thing, I dropped it, my cat's knocked it over. I just do gel cap. So vitamin D is pretty cheap, you guys, like $15. If you're 50-ish, 50 or 60 or more, 5,000 IUs is usually a good like run-of-the-mill supplement. If you've been testing yours regularly and it's running 50, 60, 70, 80 every winter, you test it, what I suggest is you just take the even 3,000 to 5,000 during the winter, and during the summer you skip it, especially if you're outside. You probably don't need it. But remember, we all absorb vitamin D differently too. So I could sit in the sun, and I don't suggest you bake out in the sun all day. I'm suggesting, I usually tell people 15 to 20 minutes of some, you know, uncovered like sun exposure, just enough to get your vitamin D. But we all absorb it differently. So I could sit in the sun for 20 minutes and you could sit in the sun for 20 minutes. You don't even have to be in the full sun. And I might have not absorbed the vitamin D the same that you do. So that's why it's good to run a lab. Especially if you're in there and they're running like a CBC, a CMP, a lipid profile, all this other stuff, just have them add vitamin D on. It's not another, they're already drawn a vial and they're just gonna, you know, they can test that. So that's like a, you can put that on your to-do list next time you go. But yeah, vitamin D, 5 to 10,000. It depends on kind of what your number is, but I'd say 10 on the upper end down to maybe 2. I have my daughter on a prescription right now because her mood was low and she was tired, and I ran her vitamin D, her iron, and her B12, and it was all really low, so we just supplement some of that stuff. She doesn't eat much meat or protein, and so that's where we get a lot of that from, so that's where that was coming from. So, but they're tiny little gel caps. Curcumin, vitamin D, omega-3 for sure. You guys have heard that before. Fish oil. You can do a vegan algae version too, right, for the fish oil. Nordic Naturals is like probably one of the best brands. It's right here. I can get it for you too. Carlson Labs is another really good one. My third choice is probably Seeking Health, Ben Lynch's company. So, but again, let me know if you, I'll have a sign up too if anybody wants me to give them a call on any of this stuff. But so those will be my top 3. The fourth one you may or may not have heard of is glutathione.
Can you spell that? What
GLUTATHIONE.
is that for?
reduce inflammation for sure. Glutathione is a lot of times in some gut, like drink mixes. A lot of times they put that in there, so you can like throw it in a shake. A lot of times it comes in a powder, or you can do a pill, but you take a lot of the pills. If you smoke, quit smoking. That goes without saying probably, but that's a big autoimmune trigger too, so. Another one particularly for fibro, a little bit more than RA, but I'm just gonna say it since we're here, is candida overgrowth. Has anybody heard of that? That's yeast overgrowth in your body. So sometimes I have people come in, and if they say they have like scalp issues, or look at their tongue, and it's white, psoriasis, eczema, skin issues. If you have yeast overgrowth in your body, that can contribute to your autoimmune symptoms also. I can also find that in that stool test GI map that I told you about. It shows candida and yeast overgrowth because it's a stool sample, so it shows what's going on in your large intestine. Thyroid imbalance, which is like a whole nother topic too. I'm covering that later this year actually, but I won't be here live talking about it. I think I'm somewhere else, but I don't remember where. We're talking about Hashimoto's and hypothyroid in particular, but just making sure that your thyroid's in balance. If you've never run that before, at minimum run what's called a TSH. If you have a family history of thyroid imbalance, or you're really tired, run a full thyroid panel, and your doctor will know what that is, but it's T3 and T4 and some antibodies and stuff, not just a TSH. If you only run a TSH and you're still tired and something's off, only 60% of the time does a TSH predict good thyroid health. So that means we miss it about 40% of the time, potentially, if you don't run a full panel. You could have a normal TSH and your other stuff could be just enough off that you don't feel great. Vitamin deficiencies, we talked about that a little bit. That can kind of, again, turn on those genes that you don't want to. Yeah, gut mold, we talked about adrenal fatigue. So, and we talked about mercury a little bit too. Like I think about sort of old school like dental fillings with that too. So food-wise, let's finish up with sort of maybe, I'm not gonna go through all of it, but maybe the big things not to put in your body, and then what the heck is left, because I'm gonna give you a list and you'll be like, what am I supposed to eat? So, there's a lot left, you guys. When I do autoimmune diets with people, I do not sit there on the couch and tell them all the things that I took out, because then they're just focusing on what they are not gonna eat for, 8 weeks. But if I showed you, I can put together 6 weeks of food for you, and I'll take out all the autoimmune triggers or anything that might be an issue. There's so much food left, even if you're a picky eater. And so I prefer to focus on what you can have, as opposed to kind of what you're taking out. I had a woman email me yesterday. She's just a hoot, but she said she's in her 70s and she eats a grilled cheese for lunch every day for like 40 years. And so I took that out. So I gave her lunch stuff, and like I sent her text messages. I sent the email. The meal plan's like 80 pages when I sent it to you. It's huge. And so, because it's got pictures and everything. And she said, Sarah, I have a bone to pick with you with this meal plan. Like, you seem to have missed one thing. I'm like, what? Did I miss something? Did I miss a week? And she was like, I don't see grilled cheese in here anywhere. I said, no, not right now. So, okay, overcooking meats. So like, I know grill is like awesome in the summer. I'm not saying don't ever grill your food, but if you grill, broil, or deep fry your meats, those meats become high in something called advanced glycation end products. It's like the leftover crap after you grill those meats. And so that goes into a whole process called glycation, but it's inflammatory. So you're better off steaming, boiling, baking your proteins. Doesn't have to be 100% of the time, just have an awareness of like how you're cooking your meat all the time if you're like blackening everything. Number 2 is a really big one, especially if you're not taking omega-3s. We have an imbalance of the 3s and the 6s. Have you guys heard of like, you're supposed to get more omega-3s and omega-6s? In the standard American diet, we get 6-to-1 ratio, mostly 6s. because of the stuff that we're eating, some of the processed food. And everyone eats too many nuts. So a lot of those have some of those have 3s in them, but they mostly have 6. And I think nuts have been touted as like a really healthy food, and it's not that they're not, but trail mix is not the same as like raw almonds, and eating those all day long is not a great idea, especially if you're trying to lose weight because they're pretty calorie dense too. So omega-6s are the polyunsaturated fats found in those rancid processed seed oils. Canola oil, corn oil, soy oil, or my favorite, vegetable oil, really know what's in there. So switching your cooking fats out for extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, or one of my favorites is actually avocado oil, because it's got a high heat point. You can find all that stuff here. So I won't go into all the foods with the 6:3 ratio, but the oils are the big one. And in fact, people ask like the big things to take out of their diet, like that would probably be my number one, is basically any of those processed like seed oils. So long term, I'm okay with like cold pressed like walnut oil, sesame oil, like some of those. But if you're gonna just pick a couple to have in your house, extra virgin, which I don't usually even cook with extra virgin olive oil because it has the best benefits when it's raw, so you're like drizzling over something, salad dressings or vegetables or whatever. I tend to cook with more solid fats like coconut, even butter. Number 3, refined sugars and artificial sweeteners. I'd actually rather you have sugar than all the fake sugars out there right now. It'll do a number on your gut. The only one research-wise that's been shown not to impact gut function, and even some people have what I would call a sensitivity to it, is stevia. But you want to get raw stevia. We have it here in drops. Sugar-free is not awesome. So if you see something that's sugar-free, unless it's something like this hint water, or let me give you a few examples. Those LaCroix, the carb blooms are all fine, generally speaking. Spindrift is one of my favorites. That one's at Target. It's 97% carbonated water and 3% juice. So it has a little more flavor than some of the LaCroix. You can do electrolyte beverages, not like Gatorade, but I talked about hydration, I think, 2 months ago here. Ultima is a really good, that's here too. Electrolyte beverage, LMNT, Element it's called, LMNT. That's a really good hydration beverage too. But ditch the artificial sugars, ditch the added sugars too. You don't want to leave here like a crazy person and read the ingredients in your ketchup, but seriously go home and read the ingredients in your ketchup, because there's like corn syrup in it and some of those other sugars and stuff. So I'm not saying you have to go make your own ketchup, but there's ketchup brands out there that don't have any of that junk in it. They're not bright red though, they're kind of like brownish red, and that's why people don't buy them, because they think they're old, but it's just because they don't have the stuff. Some of them have food dye in them too to make them red. So,
So high fructose corn syrup
Mhm.
is bad.
but
or
they've
great.
come up with names for high fructose corn syrup that aren't called that anymore, and so they like slip them in there.
Oh.
And it's in a lot of just granola bars, cereals, even like healthy crackers or things that you want. And that's why I say eat whole foods and skip all the stuff in a box, because all that stuff is in there. And you look, anything that you look back and you see an ingredient list this long is not for you. So just keep it simple, or if it doesn't have a label, even better, right? Sweet potatoes, apples, chicken, whatever. There's not a long ingredient list on that stuff, right? So think when you leave here, I'm not even talking full autoimmune diet, which that we eliminate a few other things, but just think like single ingredient foods. Sometimes this is essentially what Whole30 is about, like that Whole30 diet, but I challenge people to just eat a singular food diet for 4 weeks and see how they feel. So that would mean you wouldn't buy anything in a box or a bag that had multiple ingredients. So that really leaves you with fish, chicken, turkey, pork, beef, and all of your fruits and vegetables. All of them. Even potatoes, sweet potatoes, plantains, butternut squash, some of those like starchy ones, even that.
You can eat the white
Yeah,
potatoes?
all of
you're
them.
saying?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Now, not to go too much in detail, but when I do a full-blown autoimmune diet for somebody, I do take out nightshades, which are potatoes, peppers, and tomatoes. For fiber in particular, they really seem to bother people, and so I won't get into that whole anti-inflammatory diet, but I do take those out
Which
usually.
ones bother people, you said?
Nightshades,
Oh, which one did you mention?
potatoes, tomatoes, peppers.
Okay.
Goji berries and eggplant are in there, but most people don't even eat those, so I usually don't mention those, but those are the top 3.
Okay.
A lot of people have issues with tomatoes too. And so when I reintroduce foods after I've kind of pulled them out, we slowly, like every week, reintroduce a food and see how they react. A lot of people too will do fine with like cooked tomatoes but not raw, or vice versa, just because they're broken down a little bit more.
Okay.
Same with me for my digestives. I can't eat a ear of corn to save my life, but I could have corn chips all day and it's fine, or like a corn tortilla. It's just like broken down a little bit more, you know.
I love sweet corn.
So, but if you don't want to go full-fledged like autoimmune diet, I won't go into what that is. I teach a class on it. Just think proteins, fruits, and vegetables, singular ingredient foods, and you'll be well on your way, you know, to all of those things.